Okay, so I'm going to make a bit of a start. Any latecomers coming through, they'll just have to catch up with the content. But thank you so much for taking the time out of your afternoon and evenings to join us today at our SuperWomen in Tech event. And today's topic, which I'm actually really excited to discuss, the focus of big tech search for displaced talent. So today we're going to explore how big tech can find tech diamonds in the rough through their lesser known initiatives and recruiting processes. We're going to really focus on what does the future look like for talent and how can we improve it. So we're joined today by one of our guest speakers, Nelya Pearson. Unfortunately, our second speaker, Diana, has had to drop out due to personal reasons, but nonetheless, we're going to have a really exciting discussion today. Just a bit of housekeeping for everyone here. You'll see in the chat that we have dropped a few messages welcoming everyone. Please do say hello. We'd love to hear from you. And we're going to have a main session with myself interviewing Nelya, and then at the end there will be a Q&A for everyone. So if you do have questions, please drop them in the Q&A box and we'll pick them up at the end of the session. But welcome, and let's make a start. So just a bit of information about our organisation. Source Talks and SuperWomen in Tech are part of SGI, and we are a global staffing solution provider. Here's a bit of an overview on the screen for you about the business and the main locations we operate in. But I will highlight we do operate in over 45 European locations and deliver talent across those areas too. So if you are interested in talking to us about your career or any potential career moves, then do drop a note in the chat or look out for the follow-ups over the next few days, and we can pick up a conversation and see how we can work with you. An overview of Source Talks community. So SuperWomen in Tech, we launched last year, and one of our strands and communities globally. We cover areas such as technology, the future, and people topics. And just at the bottom is a row of our other campaigns around. So again, if you're interested in potentially speaking or being involved in our SuperWomen in Tech events or any of our other campaigns, then again, please do let myself or the rest of the team know, and we'd love to hear from you. So just a bit of background and data for everyone here to set the scene. As we've said, we're focusing today on displaced talent, but let's look at the tech landscape as a whole. So the tech industry has grown significantly over the last 10 years and continues to grow. By 2030, there is expected to have more growth than ever, but we're still seeing with that growth a rise in the gap of talent, and there's challenges there because why is the tech industry earning more but unable to find that skilled talent for us, or is the tech industry not looking in the right places for the skilled talent available to them? The graph on the right-hand side highlights some of the top challenges in recruiting tech workers: lack of necessary skills and experience, overall shortage of candidates. The final one, meeting candidates' salary expectations. And I think that's probably a real key one and a key driver too, as we're still seeing kind of the gender gap in terms of salary expectations globally, but also not understanding what those employees need and what the talent needs for them to take the role on. And the bottom left-hand corner just gives you a bit more of an insight as a whole into some stats where the tech industry is. We've carried some research out ourselves. You may have seen this posted on some of our social media outreach, and it's looking positive. Big tech's focused on diversity is a really key one for us. That it's great to see that Meta as an organisation has got 36.7% women at management level. That's a real key mover and shaker, especially if you compare that to kind of the industry benchmark and averages as a whole. And the key one for Booking.com is that there's 140 different nationalities employed in 2023. Again, looking at how they can their talent outreach and find those talent diamonds. The other two stats too, I know we're probably going to pick up on today, focusing on remote work and so the rise of female tech talent across Europe. So Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you all to our keynote guest speaker today, Nelya Pearson. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for that great introduction. So just a super quick summary of myself. I am Nelya. I've been working in tech recruitment for over 15 years, having hired for some very niche startups, including deep tech, domain, AI, ML, computer vision, and some of the larger enterprises like Meta that you've just mentioned. I'm also a career coach, so I support many underrepresented candidates, including displaced professionals with job searching and career coaching on how to enter tech domain in the UK. Really excited for this.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, welcome, and thank you again for taking the time out of your day to join us. So jumping into the first question from our team, could you share your journey with us as a tech recruiter and career coach? And how has your personal experiences changed your approach to finding talent?
Yes, of course. I'm actually a first-generation immigrant myself. So I came over to UK from Ukraine when I was about 14. All the fun time when you're a teenager and do soul searching as to what you want to do. I ended up doing law in university, and like many people in recruitment and talent, sort of fell into this world. I had to explain this to my parents along the way, what it is that we actually do. I was very fortunate that one of my first role has been doing international hiring for energy sector, focusing specifically for software, working with software and R&D companies in that space. So I grew up, if you like, in recruitment, doing international hiring. One day you'd be working with customers in Houston, then you'll be working on a project in Southeast Asia and Kuala Lumpur. So relocating candidates has actually been something I've done for, over 15 years. And I think that does allow you to have level of empathy when it comes to speaking to candidates from different backgrounds. Also, kind of my experience of, being an immigrant, someone who had to learn the language, adapt yourself to local environment, culture, customs, etc., helps me further. I think I just take extra time to really ensure that any candidates or coaching customers I work with, generally have that long-term career fit versus just filling a vacancy with whoever happens to be, whichever CV landed on my desk first. And I think I'm also a working mom. I have 3 kids. I understand all the challenges that women in tech face. They're no different to recruiters. So I feel like recruiters are gatekeepers for this industry often. It's our responsibility to improve access to underrepresented talent in general, and also that includes displaced talent.
I really like that. I think the key point you've said is really truly knowing your candidate and knowing what their needs are and putting their needs first, and not just looking at it from a CV perspective or a job stock perspective. It's about looking at that long-term partnership with the person. Really cool. Thank you. So from your perspective and your experience over the last 15 years, how can tech companies best better identify and tap into talent from lesser known regions? We've also kind of highlighted a platform such as LinkedIn. There are other groups and platforms available, of course, but I guess any tools, any areas you could possibly pick up there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The reality of certainly hiring in UK, Europe and US, probably kind of some of the biggest tech regions, is LinkedIn is the biggest tool that recruiters use. Whether it's in-house, agency, that is ultimately the network, the first tool, and something we most pay for. So we kind of need to show that return on investment. I think one thing to remember is in many countries, candidates don't actually use LinkedIn to the level that we do in UK or in Europe. I will use the example of Ukraine, where there were loads of displaced talent, mainly female candidates, had to leave due to war. And when I was doing career coaching, I mean, I would say 90% of them did not have a LinkedIn. The other good 5% that did probably did not have it populated, and ultimately they just were not searchable by recruiters. So my advice, also go beyond LinkedIn. You know, there are other tools like, for example, if you're hiring in R&D domain, Google Scholar. There are other sort of X-ray searching tools you could use where you can directly access the talent. But if you're specifically targeting underrepresented candidates, LinkedIn is actually tends to be a place where they only come to once they already moved to Europe, once they already kind of quite embedded in the local tech community. Yeah, I think it's the case of the useful techniques that we've employed is actually going where the talent hangs out. So this could be for graduate talent, specialist societies. This could be partnering with charities, non-for-profits and NGOs that support this talent with other things that go on with their life. Actually be proactive, form those partnerships. There are great communities like Talent Beyond Boundaries, tech refugees that you can reach out to. They will have literally databases of this talent that you can advertise your opportunities to. But yeah, going beyond LinkedIn is perhaps probably one of the things that could save people a lot of time.
Definitely. And there's always meetup platforms or meetup communities like we're offering that help build that network and help everyone meet one another too. So basically, step away from LinkedIn. Amazing.
Yeah, they get looked up on LinkedIn, even if you have paid that license fee as a recruiter, just because that's not always where this talent is.
Yeah, exactly. So what sectors or industries within tech do you see providing most opportunities for women and underrepresented groups, particularly those from displaced regions?
Yeah, absolutely. I found that non-for-profits, charities, or in general, impact-driven businesses on tech tend to just have values and mindset that aligns well just to, recruit in as much of an inclusive way as possible. This typically, in the tech specifically, companies that suffer from a gap in, the skill sets that they hire. So this could be your up-and-coming AI companies, that compete against big players, and perhaps they don't have the salaries, the marketing teams, etc., to do that. They tend to just have to be much more open to the talent. So you find when you send your CV somewhere like that, a person is much more likely to look at you beyond the CV and actually give you opportunity to speak to them. AI is a huge space where I see there will be a lot of opportunity for any talented professional, but especially perhaps in other areas where there are more of a barriers, there are like a defined biases, teams. AI now, there are loads of jobs that are coming up that haven't been here, even a few weeks ago. Prompt engineering, working with co-pilots, low-level coding. There are also multiple big companies that run various schemes. So, for example, Microsoft have something called Power Up program, where over a couple of months, they will actually coach someone with no coding experience to do low-level coding. They'll build up your portfolio, and at the end of the process, you'll have opportunity to connect to the businesses that take part, that deliver this training, and it's all for free. It's all remote. So you can do things around your childcare. You can do them remotely across different time zones. I think they had something like 50,000 people that took advantage of this. And this is a way that big companies try and build up the talent funnel in this skills area where, they know there will be shortage in the kind of near future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as you said, looking at that skills gap and closing the skills gap, where can you build out those skills? And actually, you've mentioned AI. I mean, Gen AI specifically is the future, isn't it? It's going to be constantly changing and evolving and requiring more and more individuals across the sector to build new skills and understand how to work with it. So That's really, really interesting initiatives. Thank you. Just a big question. So you've worked with big tech companies and scale-ups across Europe. Can you share some successful initiatives where these companies have sourced talent from underrepresented or displaced communities?
Yeah, so of course, the picture looks very different for big enterprise versus, let's say, a scale up, because you have very limited budgets, smaller teams. So I think as a startup or scale up, you have to be more creative. You literally need to go to communities and meet them, talk to them about your business. So, for example, if you work in a cloud space, it could be something like Women Tech Makers Google community, or it could be Google Cloud developer groups, right? And you tend to have very good diversity from graduates to senior hires, from speakers to attendees. So, perhaps with those companies, we sponsored events, we've really kind of had a stand and took our brand to where the most relevant candidates have been to. We have to be quite strategic with budgets. Also going out to various training programs. So for example, I work for deep tech startup, and our cloud, we were working on AWS cloud. So we actually partnered with AWS, where we sponsored one of their graduate development programs. In fact, you didn't have to be a graduate, you could be anyone who wanted to get into AWS. And we had the opportunity to present about our company to the graduates of that 3 months training program. Again, so this is why we strategically partnered with companies around the training, but this was very, very relevant to our tech stack. So we knew the people we had at the end had the training, were interested in us, and they specifically focused on reaching out to diverse candidates. So we kind of killed a few birds with one stone by doing that. So it's about doing research and making sure what you're doing aligns with your, hiring goals. On the enterprise side, and I'll use Meta as an example, that's probably the one where I think that does this initiatives really well. There is specific for women or returning parents, or in fact anyone who's been out of the industry for over 2 years. There is a return to work program in certain locations. So you can go and join Meta, get full training, mentorship, and it's a paid position. You can rotate between departments. At the end, you have opportunity to apply and interview for full-time roles. So again, not enough people know about this. We've also had specific remote events, virtual remote events that we've run for each team. So, for example, I work on UX research. So we've mapped out loads of UX research specialists all over Europe, or whichever regions we focus, including, displaced regions where you can have displaced candidates. And we invited them for these events to talk about live in London, live in San Francisco, to really actually get engineers that work for us here who are also from those communities to share their experiences. So we really done a lot of work to educate people on why they should come and work for Meta, and share success stories when people have done that. And we always netted out multiple hires across every team. Those probably were the candidates that we wouldn't have normally found on LinkedIn, or perhaps wouldn't have considered to apply to us. That's to sort of name a few. Another interesting thing, attracting candidates is one thing, but also keeping them in the funnel, engaged, and not losing them for the process because of biases is another. We actually had in Meta at the time, it was Facebook, something called Facebook Connection Program. For any candidate that is at the second interview stage, we had this database of current employees that they could reach out to for half an hour chat before the interview, to talk about life. How did they find the transition? Could be relocation, it could be any kind of internal communities that we had. Basically, they just gave candidates reassurance that in joining Meta or Facebook at the time was actually the right career choice for them, versus going for the interview because it's one of those big FANG brands that they applied for. And we found that a lot of our employees were very happy to share their experiences. So I was in the database. I loved speaking to fellow moms about work-life balance, benefits, things like this that you just would not know about until you join a company. So those are some of the initiatives that we've run that have been quite successful and always resulted in better conversion of candidates in terms of them accepting job offers.
That's really, really cool. Yeah, we definitely spoken to other connections, and we set up in our organisation having that buddy scheme almost, as you've highlighted. And it's that sense of comfort that you don't get in that interview room, you don't get in an interview scenario, but you know it's a peer-to-peer conversation. It's more open and honest, and breaking down any barriers. So love that. That's really cool. Thank you. Okay, so next question is, how do you think big tech companies can better support female tech workers from underrepresented communities in their career progression?
So yeah, that's a really good question, and I think some companies do it well, others could do it better. I think there is definitely a sense now with kind of the whole return to office movement, a bit of a diversity and inclusion fatigue. You can see it from the budgets being cut, from again, you've had the announcements around Amazon's, etc., trying to send people back into office. We're kind of going back to pre-COVID ways, So I think it's important to continue to invest in diversity and inclusion initiatives, whether it's sponsoring talks, going to the events, really, broad efforts to recruit and retain people from kind of, women, ethnic minorities, and also then retain those people for mentoring, training, and employment pathways internally. And that is a sort of a really full cycle thing. There's no point attracting this talent if you're not gonna create environment where they can stay. And this could be for example, for female underrepresented candidates, whether you are displaced or not. I think there are the same struggles. If the childcare is a problem, which it is, and the cost being high in somewhere like UK, if you have no flexibility in your working environment, that will make it difficult for you just to develop a career and just be a parent effectively. Those practical things that every employer needs to think about when they build their employer value proposition, their benefits packages, and just kind of common sense working practices. Having that flexibility allows you to have more diverse workforce and more inclusive working environment, which is actually better for the business. There's loads of research on that.
Yeah, see that again. That kind of relates back to one of your previous answers in terms of really understanding what candidates or job seekers or potential employees, what they need, what they want, and actually continue that on with that longevity throughout the company. Thank you. So what specific challenges do female tech workers from displaced regions face, and how can recruiters and companies help overcome these challenges? You have almost picked up on this already, but I don't know if there's any other points that you wanted to add to this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if we think of someone who changes jobs in general, right, whether you're male or female candidate, but let's say you're a female candidate, some of the due diligence that you need to do around benefits, etc., maternity, paternity leaves, adoption, fertility treatments that are important to women, right, professional women, that perhaps some of the male engineers don't have to worry about as much. In addition to that, when you think of a displaced candidate, someone who forcefully had to leave their home country, on top of that, they have some of the concerns that comes with that. If you have children, schooling, you can't go to work if your children are not in school, and in completely new environment, right? Things like language. Right, it's great if you have a good language skills, but perhaps you worked in not such an English language speaking environment, so that's something they're probably learning at the same time, or perhaps would like support with. And oil and gas industry was amazing with that. Even 15 years ago when I started, it was almost part of the package. Things like phone, tax advice, registering with for national insurance. So I think when it comes to hiring the talent, they need a little bit more hand holding, where possible, and big companies are great in doing that, outsourcing some of that relocation support and onboarding support. So, and that should not stop when someone joins you, because those problems don't go away when you started a new job. And if anything, they come on top of your day job. So it's ensuring that somebody has a really comfortable setup, that they understand everything about, have support with language. A lot of tech companies have support with childcare, backup, emergency childcare. They have tax advice if needed, that they can actually focus on doing their best work versus some of the things that would, pull them away from it. But I think from recruiter and HR teams is ultimately allowing candidates to time versus like trying to get them into accept a job offer on the spot, get them started yesterday, actually give these candidates time to sort out their lives. They've been really turned upside down because they had to kind of flee a conflict or there are other circumstances. So they can actually join you in the right context, enjoy the process, have all the information. I think it will typically result in much better retention, much happier and productive employee. So those are some of the things that people, I think, forget about, because I think especially with big tech, people think, oh, you should be lucky to join us. Everyone will bite my arm off to join Meta. The reality is, for some people, their environment circumstances can actually, if you put too much pressure on them and don't have these processes in place, it will put them off from joining the business.
Sure. It's a really, really nice point to end that question on. Thank you.
Cool.
So could you discuss any programs or initiatives that you've seen aimed at creating opportunities for tech talent from underrepresented or displaced communities? So you did mention a community at the beginning of the session. I can't think what they were called.
I think it's tech refugees.
Yes.
Great community. You'll find that most FANG companies actually partner with them, and these are companies it's a global nonprofit that really empowers refugees, specifically in technology sector, and they do things like hackathons, training programs. They even offer job placements like CV career support, not just with large tech companies, but even startups. So if you're a company that looking to tap into this talent, worthwhile exploring this. If you're a candidate, you can benefit from amazing network and support for free. So you don't have to go out and shell out loads of money for CVs and things like that. But actually, there is a huge community of people who want to help. There are two others. I've mentioned Tent Partnership for Refugees, which is kind of generally focuses on the private sector. So they facilitates apprenticeships and job opportunities. It could be like government, NHS. It goes beyond tech, but it includes tech. And this focuses specifically on UK and Ireland, so quite local to us. And then Talent Beyond Borders, again, works with the likes of Google, Meta, Microsoft, and really helps refugees and companies match the skills, so looks at transferable skills, what training required, and they almost like source those candidates for these big companies and beyond. So there are loads of kind of non-for-profits that could support displaced talent.
Really cool, thank you. And I think, we'll probably note those ones down in the chat in case anyone is interested in finding those. Amazing. So how can companies ensure that their hiring processes are inclusive and free from biases that may inadvertently exclude talented individuals from underrepresented regions?
Yeah, it's a good question that I don't think any company fully solved. I don't know if it's possible to completely remove biases. I think we all know about unconscious bias. I think it's just ingrained into us from upbringing and background. But I think one thing we can do is educate stakeholders to reduce those, and and to really for the recruiters, interviewers, hiring managers, all the decision makers in the hiring process that need to keep those biases in check. So I'm Ukrainian, should I be giving preference to Ukrainian displaced candidates? No, I need to keep that natural bias, even if there are good intent that comes from in check, to ensure that all candidates I'm interviewing have the same opportunity. So unconscious bias training is very easy and quite a good thing that most companies can do. A second thing, I think, sticking to structured and competency-based interviewing versus having some weird, rogue, unstructured process. It also ensures that all candidates are held against the same criteria. And I think one thing that I've mentioned around unconscious bias, not being afraid to call this out. I think people are so scared of diversity inclusion, they're afraid to say the wrong thing. So I have hiring managers say, can I say this? But it's things, like people should be able to challenge each other, saying, well, actually, no, the feedback you gave is not correct, has nothing to do with candidate skill set, that's your own bias. So whether it's calling this out at CV screening stage with hiring managers, at final stages, the interview debrief, or if you are a recruiter that works directly with co-founders, of the smallest startup businesses, coaching them on why some feedback they might be giving is a bias versus actually genuine feedback on candidates' competency. So I think combination of those things with the good process and good training can be very effective to reduce the biases.
Yeah, really cool. That definite part about in-house training. Unconscious biases, as you said, we can't escape them. They're ingrained with us, but as much as we can possibly do to change our direction of thinking, get really, really wise. So last couple of questions, I think. So what strategies would you recommend for a candidate looking to create a career in tech? It may involve relocating or taking a big career leap.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I've mentioned this, right, with like LinkedIn, for example. If you are considering any kind of career move, especially in tech, like I think research is really important. And I mean, yes, you can spend hours online, seeing what job boards are out there. But ultimately, I think what can be really powerful is networking, focusing on STEM, women in tech events, if you're professional woman. You can go even deeper. If you really want to become a cloud engineer, there are loads of cloud communities in person and remote, so you can work it around your schedule. I would aim to talk to people who are in this career path, have made that move perhaps, maybe from general engineering into cloud engineering or architecture, or I don't know, if they've been engineer, they moved into data science, and really try and speak to people, kind of learn their insights. Also get mentorship, because things that you'll read on hear from career advice and learn online, sometimes you will end up facing things with job searching and in your career, like imposter syndromes, that without that context, background, and someone to talk to, could be very challenging to deal with. So that's kind of general advice. The practical advice that I give to people as a coach is, you need to adjust yourself to the local market. So if in UK 90% of recruiters will look at LinkedIn, you need to have LinkedIn profile. You need to ensure it's written in a format and in a language using the type of searchable language that recruiters would be looking for, because you can be the most amazing specialist, but if no one can find you in these platforms, or your CV does not demonstrate that, or your LinkedIn, then unfortunately you're not going to get many approaches. And a lot of recruiters, talent professionals in-house and in an agency are often managing multiple applications. They've got a lot of commercial stresses. So it needs to be something, you need to make their job easy. So you need to almost kind of learn how to play the game, also learn how to work with recruiters. UK has one of the most developed recruitment agencies, infrastructure, and a huge amount of in-house recruiters. So networking with those and positioning yourself from CV and LinkedIn perspective, and then looking at things like interview techniques will just ensure that when you're applying for jobs, you go into these interviews, you get selected. So investing time in those networks and those resources to ensure that you have the best chance to secure those opportunities would be my kind of general advice, and even more important for displaced and underrepresented candidates.
Yeah, definitely. Really clear about that LinkedIn profile point about kind of keyword search and understanding how to make your profile more visible. Even just looking at it as a shop front window, should we say, or as your LinkedIn profile is your own mini website or brand. That's kind of how we communicate it. And just think that's the first thing someone's going to see to understand what you do, who you are, and what your skill set is. It's really key. Thank you. Okay. Oh, there we go. That was the last question. So thank you so much for that discussion. I've taken down quite a few notes, and I'm sure everyone in attendance has done as well. Some really useful points. Thank you. We've definitely got some questions that have popped up in the Q&A box. So our first question is, what was the name of the tech support? Tech Bridges.
The name of the tech refugees.
Tech refugees.
That's right. Yeah, we've got great LinkedIn page, a very active website that you can register with as well. But it's tech refugees.
Tech refugees. I think we've put that in the chat as
but
well.
with the tech.
Yeah. Okay, and then our second question is, if the candidate checks every requirement, including context and language, but is often never called to interview, what could they be missing?
I think there must be a disconnect between showing that it's typically down to your CV or LinkedIn. I would look at it from like a data point of view. Let's say you applied for 100 vacancies, and people apply for more. It really is kind of job-driven market. And if you don't get that first call from recruiter and you just get the template rejections emails, it's something in your CV or your LinkedIn, depending what you're applying with, that means you're not demonstrating those competencies that you have. Until you have feedback based on something else, but that's normally could be down to interview technique, etc. So yeah, it's down to the CV. It's either the formatting, there's something's wrong, because ultimately that's all that recruiters see. So if they're not seeing that match, that's why you're not getting called up for interviews. There's nothing beyond that. I wouldn't take it personally. I would keep working on your CV. There are loads of AI tools where you can put your CV through a tool. It will give you a kind of match. You compare it against successful tech local candidates. Use tools like ChatGPT. Could be things like spelling mistakes, loads and loads of things, but it typically comes down to CV and LinkedIn if you're not getting interview requests.
I've always found with your CV to think about that value add that you're giving. Think about what those results are and what those scenarios are, and the end of it, not just these are my responsibility. And also the point of what you just said, Nelya, around your LinkedIn as a strategy too, building that out, really improving that, making that a key part to your job application as well.
Yeah, and a quick stat. So someone who's done headhunting for over 15 years, I still do that in very niche skill sets. I would say 80% of candidates that I have placed into roles, both in an agency and as internal recruiter over the last 7 years, probably did not have a CV. I probably would have found them at an event, through some sort of website, found their LinkedIn, and then as they move through the process, would have got them to update CV and LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is exceptionally powerful. Ultimately, if you're not on LinkedIn, you're missing out. The idea with these tools, invest time in ensuring them that they're as good as they can be. Get external help, get CV writer, LinkedIn writer if you need to. If it's not your forte, you really struggle, or use AI where you can. But ideally, you want to have really great profiles. So you get incoming traffic and really good CV, so you can actually, when you're applying for these jobs, you get selected, you feature highly in that search criteria. But yeah, you're right. I think go beyond the this is a bit of a resume writing advice, going beyond the like the generalist terms and like the cheesy things that you think recruiters look for. Focusing on impact, results. If it's marketing, like the conversions, if it's sales, your results, right? How did you achieve revenue? If it's development, how many users used your product, which languages used, actually focusing on impact, because in reality, you have a couple of seconds for whoever looks at your CV to decide, are they going to shortlist you? And normally, if in doubt, they probably won't, just because we do work in an environment. This is, there are a lot of candidates in the market looking for jobs. So you really need to increase your chances on being successful.
Really good, thank you. So next question dropped in. So from Vanessa, I'm Italian but lived my whole life in Brazil. My experience has been 10 plus years in Brazil, and recently Vanessa has come to Europe. And how do you think that there is a bias recruiters may have in the fact that her location has been in Brazil? That's what I'm just
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Look, the reality is there is the ideal how things should be, and then the reality of how things are. An average, for example, agency recruiter doesn't get this whole diversity training. Quite often they probably would have gone to university or went to school in the same place. They don't really know. Not everyone has done international hiring. In-house recruiters perhaps a little bit more, because companies invest a little bit more in training. So ultimately, yes, there is the background bias, and the easy thing, a lot of companies would say to a recruiter, find me someone who works for competitor, and competitors are normally companies down the road. So again, it comes down to being smart with your CV, making it very clear for recruiter that you are actually in a country that you're applying for a job. Sometimes I see candidates based in London, but they still put the country that they've relocated from. Give them a local phone number to contact you in. In reality, people use their own phones and don't want to be spending hundreds of pounds to qualify a candidate. If there are local candidates, they can do it a little bit more easier. And also I would make it very specific that you also have a right to work in the country, because one of the biases when you see candidates who moved from other countries is quite often do they require sponsorship, which not many companies offer. So yeah, those biases are there. I think one of the ways, of course, to get around those biases, talks like this, talking to the talent teams, etc. But also, you have to play the game, make it kind of easy for recruiters to do that, and focus on when you see local job descriptions in yours, use the language from them, use the terminology that local recruiters understand, which could perhaps be different to the country from which you've relocated. I don't know if I've answered that question, Rebecca.
I definitely think you have. I mean, it just made me laugh to myself slightly about biases, and it's not really relevant, but I'm going to bring it up. In one of my first jobs, I remember what the founder of the business would always be saying, we're only going to hire people who came from a red brick university, only from a red brick university. And now that I used to hear that term all the time. That term's disappeared now. But it was very much, that was the focus. They've only graduated from those certain areas, otherwise they would not be able to work at the business. And I thought, well, that's a complete bias, isn't it? To highlight values as well. Yeah.
I think you find, even if you right from so let's say you're from UK, you grew up here, you haven't relocated, there are always some sort of bias, and quite often as a woman you have to deal with more. This is quite often the reasons they look not to hire you versus the reasons to hire you. I think that's a kind of well-known stat, right? That's why you have to tailor your job descriptions a different way to be more inclusive, not to put women off, not to use masculine language and all the macho stuff. But yeah, I think you're right. And look, as someone who has went to one of these universities, there are so many challenges of, you have people who come from a certain social background that have not perhaps had to have like part-time jobs, volunteering, all the things that actually make great employees and people who are great at early careers. And normally when you have early career CVs, you have a lot of people from Russell, like group universities, who just have university, and you have people who went to other places and maybe didn't even go to university, have done like apprenticeship or internships because they had to, I don't know, support themselves. You see so much more richer experience, the things, the practical skills that you as a business take you years to teach someone. So it's actually what ends up being a better hire. But this obsession, it typically comes from the fact that a lot of business owners themselves have those biases because they're not actually, that representative themselves.
Yeah, of course. Really good point.
Big red flag. I don't know if you joined them at the end or didn't. We won't point fingers, but yeah, it does not also make you want to join a business for someone is so pedantic.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So we've got 2 more questions, and I think that is enough for timings today. But we've got a question about mentorship and how would one go about it, especially someone who's moved to the UK and recently is looking for a job.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would look at these things from like a local and more like a countrywide or like a tech focused basis. So most, for example, like chambers of commerce for most towns will have STEM events, career events. If you're into programming, like a coding classes, there's big communities. So look at kind of your local chamber of commerce, STEM events, and just go. I think the first step is getting out of your comfort zone, and you will typically find there are senior women there who are passionate about this. They want to share the knowledge, they want to pass it on because they would have faced some of the struggles. And yeah, you'll also, like, I'll use Milton Keynes where I'm based as an example. There are women in cloud communities, STEM communities, and I'm someone who worked with businesses in London most of my life who had international operations. I don't know how in 10 years I have not got to know these communities, but they are around. Then a specific tech focused communities. I've mentioned women tech makers, amazing community. They run events internationally and in London. They normally run events partnered with big tech companies. You have like engineering managers, architects, and they offer that remote mentorship from anyone from like early careers to experience level. And there is a huge amount of diversity. Those are some of the kind of really amazing things. Obviously, if there's something you can afford, there are specific, there are coaches out there, very experienced people in the industry who provide one-to-one coaching. Typically, there is cost associated from it. But if you need support, like defining what it is that you want to do, sometimes it's an investment you need to make in yourself. But yeah, local communities and also women tech makers is a great start for general talk. You can go special like Python ladies. There are loads and loads of these communities. LinkedIn is a great place to find them. Honestly, if you go into ChatGPT and Google and say, I don't know, women in cloud communities in London, you will have a list. It's something that's very developed in the UK for sure.
Yeah. So I have seen another question jumped into the chat. Now it does ask which language skills are recruiters looking for? Top 3 languages, maybe. Now, does this mean languages as in international languages, or does this mean languages as tech languages?
Yeah, open to interpretation, I think. Yeah. But I think if we look at the trends perhaps now, right? So if we look at things like AI now, that's hard, and with that comes data engineering. I think Python and associated ML languages like PyTorch, etc., are very relevant. Actually, there is a little bit less focus on languages because you can use ChatGPT and Copilots a lot. So actually ability to use AI tools is probably one of the hottest, skills you can have right now. There are different options, like you can use Gemini, OpenAI, make custom like ChatGPT's copilots. That would be my closely followed tech skill. I wouldn't call it language, but it is probably even more important than language. And then I guess from engineering perspective, you can go into, like the tech stacks will be different for companies like Golang, C++. I mean, Ruby, there are loads. I think, of course, it's good to have a focus, but I think actually focusing on things that like cloud technology is really important right now, because a lot of these AI applications will require big computing capacity. So getting certifications in like Google Cloud Engineering or Azure, AWS, options of that can go cross languages and could be quite important to the business you're joining, because most companies cloud. In terms of the languages, like I think English language, it tends to be the international language for a lot of companies. So of course, that's really helpful. The DACH region is very big right now. We're finding that actually knowledge of German, a lot of startups, there's a big communities there. And then you've got these hubs that are coming up, like, Lisbon is a big place, Portugal now. There are these European hubs that come up. So of course that could be useful. But still we find that most people speak English. Yeah, I have a question that's probably more tech languages, but yeah, hopefully I've covered both.
Brilliant. And as our final question, as we've got time for, is you briefly mentioned a few, but are there any CV tools or platforms that can help with improving a candidate's CV? So the AI filtering software picks out their CV.
So I think big point around tools and platforms, and a lot of them are AI enabled. There's loads. I would strongly suggest using it to enhance what you're writing and check what you're writing versus completely replace what you do, because there are a lot of some companies and have like non-AI policies. There are AI tools that can screen is your CV being written by AI, so read those policy on AI usage during job application. Also, use it to enhance your own writing style, perhaps check for spelling errors, language nuances and things like that. There are tools like resume.io. Again, I can share them later with you. Any AI tools that allow you to get a benchmark of how does your CV or LinkedIn compares against people in the industry. Resume Word at resume.io. There are a couple of those. But ultimately, I would not invest too much into paid versions. I think free versions should be enough just to give you a feel how your CV compares. And yeah, look, even free version of ChatGPT is great, just to like rephrasing, summing up things, removing any kind of outdated or words. So yeah, I think the tool that you use is kind of secondary. It's how you use it, just to ensure you don't get trapped, because a lot of companies are quite hot on the use of AI. Some are more receptive than others because they still want to know authentic you. Who are they actually hiring? They're not hiring ChatGPT. So I would use it to enhance your application versus completely replace it, just kind of from the trends that I'm seeing.
And keep the CV simple, just keep it digestible. And as Nelya said, you've got a few seconds to get interest from that recruiter or internal talent person. They don't want to be deciphering through lots of different graphics and formatting. They just want to know the information from you. And it's kind of what we've seen across our organisation, the talent we work with.
100%.
Yeah.
Black and white, simple font, clear, to the point. Like this, you're not writing an essay. A CV should just get you an interview. It's an instrument for securing interviews. And it's a snapshot. People don't need to know what you've been doing as your kind of paper round job when you were 13. Like, I would focus on the most relevant experience to make it easy for recruiters to select you. It's all it comes down to, really.
Brilliant. Okay, let me just see where we're at. 3 minutes. This is the final question, and I can't take any more. But this is a slightly different question as it is around interviews. And this individual has reached the final stages of interviews and has been rejected. Are there any tips to improve that you would recommend to improve interview technique?
Yeah, I mean, look, my first in that context, I would really aim trying and get some feedback if you can, just so you're actually working on actionable feedback versus try and revamp everything. Some companies do have non-feedback culture, and that bigger companies are like that. They're just a policy. Um, I would try and if you're not getting a final, it could be just it's a competitive field. There are loads of people in tech that have been made redundant. We're still clearing for their technical talent. So don't let it kind of put you off until you get actionable feedback, right? Actually something to focus on. I would continue applying because quite often, like let's say I advertise a cloud engineer job, I will get 100 applications in day one. That's just how competitive the field is. And sometimes you have no control of other people in the process. I think things that you can do to prepare, there's no excuse, if you come to an interview, don't know basic things about the company, the area they work in, have actionable examples from your experience, avoid overgeneralizing. So it goes back to that CV. Make sure that your responses, use techniques like, STAR method. Ultimately, show you. It's kind of, if you're not getting through the final, I mean, the fact that getting to the finals it means you probably qualified. Also, culture fit, because normally final interviews around culture fit, right? Like it's more kind of, it's yours to lose. So this is where you want to show interest through preparation and also asking thoughtful questions, why this would be a good long-term career move. That's what everyone likes to hear and shows a candidate's engaged. So yeah, preparation, technique, but also don't let it put you off, because sometimes it's not down to you. There just was a stronger candidate in the mix. So yeah, try not to take it personally and ask for feedback.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Nelya. It's been really insightful, and we've definitely steered slightly off topic, but been really, really good and really useful. And hopefully the questions that have been asked, well, they've been really, really great as well. And we've given some support to those that have raised them. But just to kind of wrap up from our side, we do have our next SuperWomen in Tech event coming up on the 16th of October. And that's focusing on neurodiversity in tech with our guest speaker, Mary Williams. So the sign-up link is already live. It'd be great to see as many people have attended today to our next event too. And if you are interested in speaking or interested in exploring other topics, then please do let us know. That would be great. Thank you. Thank you, Nelya. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. Thank you. Cheers. Thanks, everyone. Bye.